Okay, let's be real for a sec. You're probably here because you've heard all the hype about apple cider vinegar. Like, it's everywhere online. And weight loss. Everyone's talking about it. But does it really work?
It's definitely been trending.
Yeah, for sure. So to figure this out, we're going to dive into some actual research. We've got articles from Healthline and Prevention, both with input from medical experts and registered dietitians. So we're starting with solid info, right? But first, for anyone who might not know, what even is apple cider vinegar?
Well, it all starts with apples, obviously. It's a two-step fermentation process. First, yeast is added to the apples, which turns the sugar into alcohol. Then bacteria get involved, and they turn that alcohol into acetic acid.
Acetic acid, that's what gives vinegar its, like, signature tang, right?
Exactly, that tangy flavor.
Hmm.
And it makes up about 5 to 6% of apple cider vinegar. Acetic acid is what people think is behind all the potential health benefits we're going to talk about.
Okay, so the big one, weight loss. Healthline talked about a 2018 study where people drank about 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar every day. And they were also on a reduced calorie diet. And they actually lost more weight and body fat than those who didn't have the vinegar. Sounds promising, right?
It does at first glance, but we have to look closer. The study has some limitations that kind of make you question the results.
Like what?
Well, the group of people they studied was pretty small, so it's possible the results wouldn't be the same if they tested it on more people.
So the findings might not hold up on a larger scale.
Right. And here's another issue. There was no placebo group.
Meaning?
Meaning there wasn't a group who thought they were taking apple cider vinegar, but actually weren't.
Oh, I get it. So we can't be sure if the weight loss was really from the vinegar or just from something else.
Exactly. Maybe the people who lost weight were just more motivated to stick to their diet, or maybe they changed other things in their lifestyle without even realizing it. We can't really tell without a placebo group.
So one study, even if it sounds good, doesn't prove apple cider vinegar works for weight loss.
Yeah.
Got it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you look at more recent reviews of the research, things get even more complicated. Like a 2022 review found that only the studies that lasted a short time showed people eating less. The longer studies, no real effect.
So the weight loss might just be temporary. Good to know.
It is. Now let's move on to another thing people say about apple cider vinegar, that it makes you feel full, so you naturally eat less.
Yeah, I have heard that one. Any truth to it?
Well, the research is all over the place. Some studies do suggest that feeling of fullness, but they often used way more acetic acid than what you'd find in a normal bottle at the store.
So those studies might not reflect what happens in real life.
Exactly. And there's another thing. Apple cider vinegar can slow down digestion. For some people, that's no big deal, but for others, like people with gastroparesis, that's a condition where the stomach empties slowly. Apple cider vinegar could make things worse.
That's important. Something that might be good for one person could be bad for another.
Exactly. It reminds us that health is not one size fits all. We all have our own needs.
For sure. And both of our sources made it clear that apple cider vinegar is not some magic weight loss solution.
Absolutely. It's not about replacing healthy habits with vinegar. It's about adding it to an overall approach that includes a balanced diet and exercise.
Right, it's not a shortcut.
Yeah.
Now, let's move away from the weight loss thing for a bit. What about other benefits of apple cider vinegar? Are there areas where the science is a bit stronger?
Yeah, there are. The weight loss stuff is still up for debate, but there are some other interesting areas where apple cider vinegar shows promise.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more.
Well, for one, there's some evidence that apple cider vinegar might help with blood sugar control. There are a few studies on this, and one from 2013, which Healthline mentioned, found that apple cider vinegar helped lower blood sugar spikes after meals.
Interesting. Why is that important?
Well, when your blood sugar spikes, you often get those energy crashes and crazy cravings. That makes it super hard to stick to healthy eating, right?
Oh, I know those cravings all too well.
Yeah. And if your blood sugar stays high for a long time, it can increase your risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So keeping those levels stable is important for overall health.
Okay, that makes sense. So apple cider vinegar might help with that.
Yeah, potentially. And Prevention talked about another interesting thing, how apple cider vinegar might improve the way your body responds to insulin.
Yeah, they mentioned studies where having vinegar with a high-carb meal helped the body use insulin better. But to be honest, I'm not totally clear on what insulin sensitivity actually means. Can you explain it simply?
Sure. Think of insulin like a key that unlocks your cells. It lets glucose from your blood enter the cells to be used for energy. Insulin sensitivity is how well your cells respond to that key. If your cells become resistant to insulin, it's like the lock is rusty and the glucose can't get in as easily.
And that's what causes high blood sugar, right?
Exactly. The glucose builds up in your blood because it can't get into your cells properly. And that's when you start to see problems, like an increased risk of type 2 diabetes.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So, improving insulin sensitivity is like making sure those locks are working smoothly, right?
That's a great way to put it. And some research suggests apple cider vinegar might help with that process.
Wow, fascinating. So we've got blood sugar control and insulin sensitivity. Anything else?
There is. Both Healthline and Prevention talked about apple cider vinegar and cholesterol. Healthline even mentioned a 2021 research review that found it could lower both total cholesterol and triglycerides.
Okay, great. But can you remind me what triglycerides are again? I always get them mixed up with cholesterol.
Sure. Cholesterol is a fatty substance found in all the cells in your body. You need it for healthy cells, but too much cholesterol, especially the bad kind called LDL, can be a problem.
Right, LDL, bad cholesterol. Why is that?
Well, high LDL cholesterol can cause plaque buildup in your arteries. It's like your arteries are getting clogged up, which restricts blood flow and increases your risk of heart disease.
Sounds scary.
And what about triglycerides? Triglycerides are another type of fat found in your blood. They come from the food you eat, but your body can also make them. High triglyceride levels are also linked to an increased risk of heart disease.
So managing both cholesterol and triglycerides is super important for heart health.
Absolutely, and that's why the findings about apple cider vinegar's potential effects on cholesterol and triglycerides are so interesting.
Now, I remember Healthline mentioned something a bit more complex, something about apple cider vinegar having antimicrobial property.
Oh yeah, I knew you were going to bring that up. It's definitely something that needs more research. We need to be careful here because most of the studies showing apple cider vinegar fighting bacteria have been done in test tubes, not on actual people.
Ah, so we can't just assume those results will be the same in humans.
Right. We need more research to see if and how these antimicrobial properties might actually benefit people. But the findings are definitely interesting.
I'm curious, what did the studies actually show?
Well, some of them showed apple cider vinegar's potential against common bacteria that can cause problems like E. coli and S. aureus.
Those can definitely cause trouble if they get out of control.
Yes, they can. And some studies even showed activity against antibiotic-resistant strains of these bacteria, like certain types of E. coli.
That's pretty amazing. Antibiotic resistance is a big problem these days.
It is, but again, these are just early findings. We need more research to understand what it all means for human health.
Okay, so we'll have to wait and see on that one. But it's definitely something to watch.
Definitely. Now, I bet our listener is probably wondering how to actually use apple cider vinegar.
I am too. Let's talk about that. What's the best way to take it?
Well, first things first. Moderation is super important. Both Healthline and Prevention said not to go crazy with it. They suggest 1 to 2 tablespoons per day, and it's important to dilute it in water.
Dilute it? Why is that?
Undiluted apple cider vinegar is very acidic. It can actually damage your tooth enamel and irritate your throat.
Oh, wow. That doesn't sound good. So always dilute it with water. Got it. What about the best time to take it? Does it matter?
That's a good question. Some experts suggest drinking it before meals, especially if you're hoping to feel fuller, but we need more research to be sure about that.
Okay, so no hard and fast rules there. What if you hate the taste of apple cider vinegar? Are there other options?
Definitely. Prevention had some good ideas. You can add it to salad dressings, marinades, even soups or stews. It gives a nice tangy flavor.
Yeah, that's true. You don't have to just drink it straight. And I remember one more tip from Prevention. When you're buying apple cider vinegar, look for one that's raw and unfiltered.
Yes, that's key. Raw and unfiltered means it contains the mother. That's that cloudy stuff you sometimes see at the bottom of the bottle.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
But what is the mother exactly? Why is it so important?
It's basically a bunch of good bacteria and enzymes that form naturally in the vinegar when it's fermenting.
So it's like an added bonus of good stuff.
You got it. Now, we've talked about a lot of potential benefits of apple cider vinegar, but remember, it's not a magic cure.
Right. It's not about replacing healthy habits with a spoonful of vinegar.
Exactly. It's about making it part of a holistic approach to health. That means a balanced diet, regular exercise, managing stress, all that good stuff.
Yeah. And it's always best to talk to your doctor before making big changes to your diet, especially if you have any health conditions already.
Definitely. Everyone is different, and what works for one person might not work for another. It's always better to be safe and get advice from your doctor.
Good advice. Now, before we move on, let's go back to the weight loss conversation for a minute and touch on a few more things.
Okay, sounds good. Let's get back to it.
Welcome back. So, in part one, we talked about what apple cider vinegar is, how it's made, and all the buzz around weight loss.
Right. And we found out that some studies do show a link between ACV and weight loss, but more research is definitely needed.
Exactly. We also started talking about some other potential benefits, like blood sugar control and cholesterol. Let's dig deeper into those. So, what about those blood sugar benefits? How might ACV actually help regulate blood sugar?
This is where it gets really interesting. ACV seems to have some real potential here. Remember that 2013 study we mentioned where apple cider vinegar helped lower blood sugar spikes after meals?
Yeah, that one caught my attention for sure.
It's a great example of how ACV might work. The people in the study who had vinegar with a high-carb meal had much lower blood sugar and insulin levels afterwards.
So it's like ACV helps prevent those huge blood sugar spikes after you eat.
Yes, exactly. And those spikes can mess with your energy levels and make you crave all the wrong things, which makes healthy eating a lot harder.
Oh, tell me about it. I know those cravings all too well. It's like a constant battle.
Right. And over time, if your blood sugar is always high, it can increase your risk of type 2 diabetes. So keeping those levels in check is super important for your health.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So ACV might help keep blood sugar stable and prevent those long-term health risks.
That's the idea. Now, prevention also talked about how ACV might improve insulin sensitivity.
Yeah, they said some studies showed that having vinegar with a high-carb meal could help your body use insulin better. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm still a bit confused about what insulin sensitivity means. Can you break it down for me?
Sure. Imagine insulin is like a key that unlocks your cells to let glucose in. The glucose comes from your blood and your cells need it for energy. Insulin sensitivity is all about how well your cells respond to that key. If your cells become resistant to insulin, it's like the lock is rusty and the glucose has trouble getting in.
Ah, okay. So that's what leads to high blood sugar.
Exactly. The glucose can't get into your cells properly, so it builds up in your blood, and that's when things can start to go wrong, increasing the risk of type 2 diabetes.
Okay, I get it now. So improving insulin sensitivity is like fixing that rusty lock, right?
Yeah.
Making sure the glucose can get into the cells where it needs to be.
Perfect analogy, and some research suggests that apple cider vinegar might be able to help with that.
Wow, that's incredible. So we've got blood sugar control, insulin sensitivity. Didn't both Healthline and Prevention also mention something about cholesterol? Like, wasn't there a study that showed ACV could lower cholesterol levels?
Yes. You're right. Healthline talked about a 2021 research review that found apple cider vinegar could lower both total cholesterol and triglycerides.
Awesome. But I always get cholesterol and triglycerides confused. Can you remind me what they are and why they're important?
Of course. Cholesterol is a fatty substance that's in all the cells in your body. It's important for healthy cells, but if you have too much cholesterol, specifically the bad kind called LDL, it can cause problems.
LDL cholesterol, right? The bad one. Why is it bad?
High LDL cholesterol can lead to plaque buildup in your arteries. It's like your arteries are getting clogged, and that restricts blood flow and increases your risk of heart disease.
Yikes, that's definitely not good. And triglycerides, what are those again?
Triglycerides are another type of fat in your blood. You get them from food, but your body can also make them. High triglyceride levels are also linked to a higher risk of heart disease.
So it's really important to keep both cholesterol and triglycerides under control for good heart health.
Absolutely. That's why those findings about apple cider vinegar are so exciting.
Okay, now I want to go back to something Healthline talked about. It was a bit more complicated, something about apple cider vinegar having antimicrobial properties.
Ah, yes, I was wondering if you'd bring that up. It's definitely an area that needs more research for sure. But it's important to remember that most of the studies showing apple cider vinegar working against bacteria were done in test tubes, not in people.
So we can't just assume it'll work the same way in humans.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
We need more research to figure out if and how these antimicrobial properties might actually work in the real world. But the research is definitely pretty interesting.
I'm definitely interested to hear more. What did those studies actually show?
Well, some of them showed apple cider vinegar had potential against some pretty common bacteria, like E. coli and S. aureus.
Yeah, those can definitely cause some serious issues.
Exactly. And what's even more interesting is that some studies showed it might work against certain types of E. coli that are resistant to antibiotics.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, especially with how big of a problem antibiotic resistance is.
It is. But again, it's important to remember that these are just early findings. We need more research to see how these antimicrobial properties might benefit people in real life.
Okay, so we need to wait for more research on that one, but definitely something to keep an eye on.
Definitely. So now I bet our listener is wondering, how do I actually use apple cider vinegar?
Yeah, me too. That's the best way to take it.
Well, first and foremost, moderation is key. Both Healthline and Prevention were very clear about not going overboard. They suggest sticking to 1 to 2 tablespoons a day and always diluting it in water.
Diluting it. Why is that so important?
Undiluted apple cider vinegar is very acidic, and it can actually erode your tooth enamel and irritate your throat.
Ouch. That doesn't sound fun at all.
Mm.
So always dilute it with water. Got it. What about the best time of day to take it? Does it matter?
Good question. Some experts recommend having it before meals, especially if you're trying to feel more full, but the jury's still out on that one.
So no hard and fast rules there. What if you just can't stand the taste of apple cider vinegar? Are there other ways to have it?
Definitely. Prevention had some great tips for that. You can try using it in salad dressings, marinades, or even adding it to soups and stews. It adds a nice tangy flavor.
That's a good point. You don't have to just drink it. And I remember another tip from Prevention. When you're buying apple cider vinegar, go for raw and unfiltered.
Yes, absolutely. Raw and unfiltered means that it contains the mother. It's that cloudy stuff you sometimes see in the bottle.
Oh yeah, I've seen that before. What is the mother exactly? Why is it good?
Basically, it's a bunch of good bacteria and enzymes that are naturally present in the vinegar during the fermentation process.
So it's like an extra boost of good stuff.
You could say that. Now, even though we've been talking about all these potential benefits of apple cider vinegar, it's important to remember that it's not a miracle cure.
Right. It's not about ditching healthy habits and just relying on vinegar.
Exactly. It's all about incorporating it into a healthy lifestyle. Balanced diet, regular exercise, managing stress, all the important things.
And of course, talk to your doctor before making any big changes to your diet, especially if you have any health conditions.
Absolutely. Everyone is different, and what works for one person might not work for another. It's always best to be on the safe side and get advice from a healthcare professional.
Good advice. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, let's circle back to that weight loss topic and touch on a few more things.
Okay, sounds good. Let's dive back in.
Okay, so we've covered a lot about apple cider vinegar, potential benefits for blood sugar, cholesterol, even those antimicrobial properties. But we've also been pretty clear that the research isn't always super conclusive, especially when you're talking about weight loss.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important to remember that everyone's different, What works for one person might not work for someone else.
For sure. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's try to bring it all together. What are the key takeaways for our listeners? Like, if someone's hoping for a magic weight loss solution, what's the main message here?
The bottom line is apple cider vinegar is not some magic weight loss cure. Some studies do suggest it might have a small effect, but it's definitely not a replacement for a healthy lifestyle.
Right. It's not about ditching healthy habits and just taking some vinegar.
Exactly. Both Healthline and Prevention really emphasized focusing on things like a balanced diet and regular exercise. Those are the real foundations for managing your weight.
But even if the weight loss stuff isn't totally proven, there are other potential benefits of apple cider vinegar that seem pretty helpful for a healthy lifestyle.
Oh, absolutely. The research on blood sugar control is really interesting. We saw how ACV might help stabilize blood sugar, which could be helpful for managing those crazy cravings and even reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes.
And it's not just blood sugar. We talked about how ACV might improve insulin sensitivity, lower cholesterol levels, and there's even that research on antimicrobial properties, so we need more research on that to see how it works in people.
Right. It's all connected. When you look at all these potential benefits, it's easy to see why apple cider vinegar is so popular.
Totally. So for anyone listening who's thinking about adding apple cider vinegar to their routine, what's the most important stuff to remember?
Well, don't overdo it. Moderation and dilution are key. Remember, both of our sources recommended 1 to 2 tablespoons a day, diluted in water. That undiluted stuff is strong, it can damage your teeth and irritate your throat.
And it's always a good idea to check with your doctor before making big changes to your diet, especially if you have any health issues already.
Exactly. Everyone's different, so what works for one person might not be right for another. It's always best to err on the side of caution and get personalized advice from a healthcare professional.
Great advice. Now, before we go, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've talked a lot about apple cider vinegar and how it might fit into a healthy lifestyle. But at the end of the day, you're in charge of your own health journey. So here's a question for you to think about. What are your non-negotiable healthy habits? Are there small changes you can make today beyond just adding apple cider vinegar that will have a big impact on your overall health and well-being? Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.